Success, as I have told you time and time again, does not bend for the man who quits. It does not show itself to the man who walks away from his own decisions. It bows only to the individual who forces himself to continue, not when it's convenient, not when it's simple, but when it is most difficult, when every part of him wants to give up. Because true persistence is not an act of ease. It is a deliberate and violent overthrow of the weak self. It is the most noble form of self-discipline, the refusal to let circumstances decide who you are. Now, I want you to listen carefully. The great test of your life is not whether you can get started, it is whether you will keep going when everything becomes uncertain. That is the line where most men stop. They call it burnout, they call it wisdom, they call it timing. But in truth, it is nothing more than surrender. And if you surrender once, you will surrender again. You are building a relationship with resistance. You are training your mind to interpret struggle as a signal to stop rather than a sign to press forward. What you do when you don't feel like continuing, that's the real measurement of your potential. That's the dividing line between those who say they want something and those who are willing to prove it. The proof isn't found in your plan. It's not in your ambition. It's in your movement. Do you take the next step when the feeling is gone? Do you carry the vision when it gets heavy? Do you remain committed even when no one is watching? You cannot afford to live by emotion. You cannot afford to wait for conditions. The man who waits is a man who wastes. And the man who wastes time, energy, and discipline for the sake of temporary comfort loses the very thing that would have given his life power. Your life becomes power only when it is controlled by principle, not feeling. And the principle is this: you made a decision, and now you must honor it regardless of how long it takes, how difficult it feels, or how quiet it gets. You may say, "I'm tired." You may say, "Nothing is working." But I ask you this: how do you measure progress? Do you measure it only by results? Do you measure it only by outcomes? Because if so, you will always stop when the result delays. But the man of persistence understands something deeper. He knows the soil takes time. He knows the harvest does not appear just because the seed was planted. He is not discouraged by silence. He is not shaken by delay. He knows that time is not his enemy. It is his test. Most men misunderstand the nature of pressure. They see it as a barrier. But pressure is a gift. It is the proof that you are moving forward. It is the fire that hardens your identity. Every time you face it and keep going, you gain something no man can give you, a deeper trust in yourself. You begin to look in the mirror and see someone who does not waver, someone who does not fold, someone who can be trusted by himself. And that trust is everything. That trust gives you clarity. That trust gives you courage. Because when you trust yourself, you no longer require perfect plans. You no longer demand easy paths. You no longer wait for ideal timing. You simply execute. You build. You endure. And you do so with your head high. Because you understand that the path to greatness is not paved with comfort, it is paved with consistency. There will be a voice inside you, one that says, "You can stop now." One that whispers, "This is too much." That voice is not your enemy. It is your test. That voice is not here to destroy you. It is here to see if you believe your own commitment, because you will never rise above your ability to stay true to yourself when no one else is holding you accountable. You must learn to be your own standard, your own structure, your own demand. You must become the one who holds yourself to the highest expectation. Because if you do not demand the most from yourself, the world will offer you the least. If you are not willing to discipline yourself, life will do it for you, and its consequences are always more severe than your own. You must push beyond your preference. You must push beyond your comfort. You must push beyond the point where most men stop and say, "That's enough." Because enough is the enemy of achievement. Enough is where dreams die. Enough is where regret is born. You are not here for enough. You are here for the highest version of yourself. And that version is not found in ease, it is found in effort. Sustained, deliberate, unapologetic effort. Force yourself. Force yourself to take one more step when your mind says, sit down. Force yourself to repeat the process again when it looks like nothing is changing. Force yourself to wake up with discipline, not emotion. Force yourself to move, not because it's easy, but because it's required. That is the difference between ordinary men and exceptional ones. Ordinary men live within the boundaries of comfort. Exceptional men expand through discomfort. They force themselves forward, not because they want to, but because they've decided to, and decision is everything. A man who has truly decided no longer looks for options. He no longer questions his path every time the wind shifts. He no longer debates himself. He moves forward with finality. With finality comes focus. And with focus comes force. And with force, the walls that once looked impossible begin to break. But the breaking never happens for the man who quits. If you quit, you teach your subconscious that quitting is a solution. And once it accepts that message, it will feed it to you every time life becomes difficult. But if you train it to see quitting as betrayal, it will stop offering it as a choice. Your mind is your servant, but only if you make it so. If you don't, it becomes your master, and it will guide you down every path of least resistance until your potential is nothing more than theory. But that is not your path. Not anymore, because you are waking up to something higher. You are beginning to understand that the man who finishes is not the one who always had the most motivation, but the one who simply refused to be led by weakness. He mastered his own momentum. He commanded his own action. And because of that, he earned what others only dreamed of. Your next breakthrough will not come because you feel better. It will come because you acted better. Your next level will not come because the world made it easier. It will come because you forced yourself to become stronger. You do not wait for doors to open. You build them. You break them. You become them. That begins now. It begins with the next hour, the next decision, the next act of discipline. It begins the moment you silence the voice that says, you don't have to do this. Because yes, you do. You have to do this if you want peace. You have to do this if you want pride. You have to do this if you want to live a life that does not haunt you. You must move forward, even when it's hard, even when it's lonely, even when you feel nothing changing. Because something is changing. You are. And the man you are becoming will one day thank you for not quitting when it would have been easier, smarter, and safer to walk away. You forced yourself, and that decision changed everything. There is a law as old as time. The man who learns to command himself in the absence of ease will inherit what others only beg for. That law does not favor the man who starts strong. It does not reward the man who speaks loudly. It shows up for the man who finishes. And finishing always demands that you force yourself to continue long after you would have once stopped. You are not here to perform for emotion. You are here to transform into principle. Emotion will tell you it's too late. It will tell you to pause, to wait for the right moment, the right energy, the right signal. Principle tells you none of that matters. Principle commands you to act not because it feels right, but because it is right. And that is the kind of standard that separates temporary progress from permanent transformation. Ask yourself this. When it gets hard, who are you? When it's quiet, when nothing is changing, when the reward seems hidden, who are you then? Because who you are in those moments is who you really are. That's where discipline is proven. That's where identity is forged. And that's where most men fall short, not because they couldn't, but because they never forced themselves to stay long enough to find out what was waiting on the other side. You must learn to override your comfort system. You must interrupt your instinct to slow down when the discomfort begins. because the old you, the weaker self, is programmed to escape challenge. He is conditioned to turn around when uncertainty shows up, and that version of you must be replaced. Replaced not by wishful thinking, not by reading, but by action. Repeated, forceful action. Doing what needs to be done regardless of how it feels. You do this not just once, but over and over again until it becomes your new instinct. That is how the identity is rewritten. You don't change who you are through thought. You change who you are through pattern, through consistency, through movement that defies impulse, through routines that replace excuses. And the only way to build those patterns is to move forward anyway, especially when you don't want to. Because here is what most never understand. Every excuse sounds reasonable when you're tired. Every justification sounds clever when your mind is fogged. And the only weapon you have in those moments is pre-decided discipline. You don't trust the voice of fatigue. You don't follow the logic of fear. You fall back on the decision you already made. I finish everything I start. And that one line, that one vow can become the foundation for your entire breakthrough. Most people never build that kind of vow. They make deals with their comfort. They allow their feelings to renegotiate their actions. They treat pressure like a reason to pause instead of an invitation to rise. But you must not do that anymore. You are finished with partial effort. You are done with emotional standards. You are now building from something higher, permanent principle. When you live from principle, you are no longer distracted by how long it's taking. You no longer check constantly for results. You simply show up. You simply execute. You simply move forward. And you do it with calm. You do it with clarity. Because you finally decided that your value is not based on whether you feel like working today, it is based on whether you keep your word. And keeping your word to yourself is the beginning of real power. The man who can trust his own decision is a rare man, because most people lie to themselves all day long. They say they'll start tomorrow. They say they'll stop quitting. They say this time is different. But nothing changes. Why? Because they've trained themselves to break promises to their own mind. But you're no longer one of those men. You are learning to trust yourself again, not through perfection, but through persistence. Not because every day is easy, but because every day you show up anyway. And that act alone begins to build something unstoppable inside you. The understanding that no matter how you feel, no matter what's going on around you, you can be counted on. And that belief in yourself is worth more than gold. Because belief fuels movement. And movement creates results. And results bring more belief. And eventually you reach a point where discipline becomes who you are, not something you try, but something you own. But to get there, you must walk through the fire of inconsistency, the fire of fatigue, the fire of delay, and you must not run. You must not flinch. You must not lower your standard just because it hurts. Because pain is not the enemy, pain is your teacher. The pain of forcing yourself is the pain of shedding the old self, of burning off the laziness, the inconsistency, the weakness. And yes, it is uncomfortable, but the reward is not found in comfort. It is found in mastery. And mastery always lies on the other side of pain. You must learn to breathe in the pressure, to welcome it, to use it, because when most men break under it, you will grow stronger. When others retreat, you will advance. And that mindset alone puts you in a category all your own, because the world is full of starters. It's full of dreamers. It's full of men who say one day. But very few will ever force themselves to continue on the days they don't want to. Very few will grind it out when there is no light, no reward, and no applause. But that's where the greats are born. Not on the stage, not in the spotlight, in the quiet, in the early hours, in the tension, in the middle of fatigue, in the moment where giving up would feel justified, but continuing is chosen instead. You have access to that choice every single day. You may not be able to control how you feel, but you can always control what you do. And if you control what you do long enough, you begin to control how you feel, because discipline begins to reshape your emotion. You start to associate effort with satisfaction. You start to associate difficulty with growth, and that psychological shift changes everything. Now, when struggle shows up, you don't collapse, you lean in. Now, when nothing seems to be happening, you don't panic, you produce. Now, when your mind says stop, you say back, we're not finished yet. And that moment, that reversal of weakness into strength, is when you become the kind of man who no longer has to force himself, because you've made perseverance natural. You've conditioned yourself to move forward, not out of motivation, but out of identity. And once it becomes your identity to never quit, the battle is already won. Because that man, the one who cannot be stopped, doesn't need cheering, doesn't need favorable conditions, doesn't need things to feel perfect. He is driven from the inside, pulled forward by his own commitment. And that force is more powerful than anything life can throw at him. So I ask you in the clearest terms, when will you decide that stopping is no longer an option? When will you become fully unavailable for quitting? When will you declare, in action, not in words, that you are the kind of man who continues no matter what? That decision doesn't come from inspiration. It comes from standard, from pain, from a quiet voice inside you that says, enough games, enough weakness, enough delay. I am the man who finishes, and I will prove it starting now. From that place, everything shifts. Because now, your time is no longer wasted debating. Your energy is no longer lost in second guessing. You don't stall. You don't pause. You move, and as you move, you change. You grow stronger. You grow clearer. You grow faster. You become the kind of man the world cannot ignore. Because you have proven through every action that you can be trusted with results, with success, with influence. And it all began with one thing. You forced yourself, and you kept forcing yourself until you no longer had to. The man who finishes is not the one who had the least resistance. He is not the one who had the easiest path. He is the one who said, I will keep going regardless of how I feel. And the longer he walks in that decision, the more he begins to experience something the quitter will never taste, certainty. Certainty is earned, not from knowledge, not from talent, but from follow-through. When you continue beyond the moment when most would stop, something inside you changes. You stop asking if you're the kind of man who will make it. You stop wondering if you have what it takes. You know you do because you've seen yourself push past the line you once never crossed. That becomes your new identity, not a man who tries, but a man who finishes. Not a man who gets ready, but a man who is always ready. That identity makes you unstoppable. Because now your power no longer depends on external motivation. It's been internalized through repetition. And I must repeat this. You become what you practice. If you practice pausing every time pressure rises, you will become fragile. If you practice negotiating with your lesser self, you will become unreliable. But if you practice pushing, if you practice continuing, if you practice doing what you said you would, even when the feeling has left you, then you will become unstoppable. You will become dependable. You will become that rare individual who carries his vision through the fire and never lets go of the rope. You must never forget that this world is designed to distract, to offer you comfort over character, to present escape over excellence. And if you are not rooted in something unshakable, you will drift. You will delay. You will justify. You will quit. So you must become your own anchor. You must become your own force. You must become the one voice in your life that is never silent. The voice that says, Number 2, we are not done here. And what happens when you do? When you show up tired, when you show up discouraged, when you show up uncertain but you still show up, you develop a self-respect that no man can give you, no man can take away. That respect is the foundation for long-term greatness. Because long-term greatness is not built in sprints, it is built in invisible hours, in repeated effort, in continuing to build even when no one is watching. The man who only moves for approval is the man who will stop when the applause dies. But the man who continues out of integrity, he outlasts them all. You must get used to being alone on the journey. Not because you are alone in value, but because you are alone in standard. You will do things others won't. You will repeat when others stop. You will push further when others settle. And in that solitude, something beautiful happens. Your purpose becomes clear. Your pace becomes yours. You no longer look side to side. You no longer compete. You dominate, not others, but your former self. That is the highest form of power, to know that yesterday's version of you could not match today's endurance. That today's version is further, stronger, more focused, and more durable. And if you can do that today, you can do it again tomorrow, and again, until the world begins to shape itself around your effort. Let me be absolutely direct with you. Success is not an accident. It is not a gift. It is not a moment of luck. It is a consequence. It is the result of discipline repeated past the breaking point. It is the reward for those who are willing to suffer with direction, who are willing to burn through excuses until all that remains is movement. And movement, forward movement, is what keeps the vision alive. When you move, you prove. You prove that your vision is not just an idea, but a law you intend to enforce through effort. Effort is the only thing the world respects. And it respects it over time. Anyone can work hard for a day, a week, a season, but what happens when the months stretch out? When the progress slows down? When the victories are rare and the burden is high? The one who forces himself to keep going, he wins. Not because it was fair, but because he was faithful. Not because it was smooth, but because he was steady. Not because he felt strong, but because he acted with strength. It is always that way. You do not wait to feel ready. You act until readiness is created, and that readiness grows through pressure, not ease. Stop asking for relief. Start building resistance. Stop hoping it gets easier. Start preparing to get tougher. Because life will not soften for you, but you can harden for it. You can become the kind of man who is not fazed by obstacles, who does not tremble when plans fall apart, who does not stop to entertain every voice of doubt. You can become the kind of man who hears the storm and keeps walking. Not because the storm is quiet, but because your purpose is louder. And the man whose purpose is louder than his pain, that man becomes unstoppable. Now, I know what you might be thinking. How long do I have to keep going like this? My answer? As long as it takes. If you are still asking how long, then you have not fully decided. Because the man who has decided never asks that question. He already knows. He keeps going until it's finished. Until it works. Until it's real. Until there's no quit left in his bones. Until he sees what he committed to in his mind become real in the world around him. There is no other path. There is no shortcut. There is only the way of the builder. The way of the one who refuses to stop. And you were born to be that builder. Every part of you is capable of carrying more than you thought. Your mind is not too weak. Your heart is not too tired. Your energy is not too low. You are simply untrained. And training begins with one thing. Doing what you said you would when you no longer feel like it. You may doubt. That's fine. You may feel tired. That's natural. You may lose motivation, that's expected. But none of those things remove your responsibility to keep going. You are no longer operating on preference. You are operating on principle. You are no longer chasing feelings. You are enforcing standards. You are no longer trying to impress. You are proving to yourself what you're made of. That is your work now. To continue when it doesn't make sense. To press forward when logic says pause. To finish what you start. Not because you have to, but because you said you would. And that's who you are now. A man of decision. A man of discipline. A man of force. You will be misunderstood. You will be doubted. You will be underestimated. But none of that matters. Because you are not here for approval. You are here for completion. You are not here for applause. You are here for alignment. You are not here to be celebrated. You are here to be transformed. And transformation, my friend, does not happen in comfort. It happens in fire. And if you walk through that fire, if you stay in the fight, if you refuse to step back when everything says give up, you will emerge as something new. You will no longer wonder if you have what it takes. You will know you do, because you earned it. Not once, but every day you refused to quit. Every day you chose to build instead of break. Every day you silenced the weaker voice inside of you. You didn't run. You didn't fold. You didn't explain. You just kept walking. And because you kept walking, the reward became inevitable. Not luck, not chance, not destiny, law. The law of the man who does not stop. You are now that man. You are not what you feel. You are what you do. You are not how you start. You are how you finish. And the finish line? It belongs only to those who force themselves to reach it.